Pension legislation and pension rules changed quite substantially in 2006, and at that point in time a new concept of a lifetime allowance was introduced to the pensions industry. What the lifetime allowance is and does is essentially allows an individual to accumulate pension assets up to the value of a ceiling, and this ceiling is the lifetime allowance. So it's a sum of money basically up to which an individual can accumulate pension funds without suffering any tax charges. Once an individual accumulates funds that go beyond the value of that ceiling, that lifetime allowance, potentially there will be a tax charge on any excess. So the lifetime allowance, when it was introduced back in 2006, was set at £1.5 million. Legislation at that point included the ability for the lifetime allowance to increase incrementally each year. So by 2011, the lifetime allowance was actually standing at £1.8 million. We then had a change of thought and a change of government approach to pension plans, and they decided that they would start reducing the lifetime allowance. So essentially reducing the amount of money that an individual can have within a tax relievable pension scheme. So the lifetime allowance reduced from £1.8 million down to £1.5 million in 2012. It further reduced down to £1.25 million in 2014. And in April 2016, it's reduced down to £1 million. So an individual currently accumulating funds into a pension plan has to be aware and have one eye on the fact that they have a ceiling on the amount of pension that they can accumulate before potentially they'll suffer a tax charge. Now, the pension pot itself is only tested against this lifetime allowance, against this ceiling, at the point that an individual is taking benefits. So that at that point in time, your fund you'd look at the value of your fund and say, okay, it's £500,000. The lifetime allowance is £1 million, so I fall well within that lifetime allowance and there's no tax charge. If at retirement instead your fund was worth £1.2 million, that's above the current ceiling of £1 million. So that excess, that extra £200,000 would be subject to a tax charge if you were taking benefits from it. And that tax charge will either be 55%, so 55p in the pound, if you're taking it out as a lump sum, or if you're taking the excess money out as pension, the tax charge is 25%. So it's quite a substantial tax charge, and it's one that you can never really afford to ignore. It always has to be borne in mind when you're contributing monies into a pension scheme. To further complicate the position, not only are your funds tested against this lifetime allowance at the point that you take benefits, say at retirement, but they can also be tested then if you decide to buy an annuity. So you go off to an insurance company with your pot of money and say, I want a guaranteed income for life. That would trigger a test against the lifetime allowance. And also, if an individual stays within what's known as drawdown, so they leave their money sitting in a pension arrangement but access benefits from that pension arrangement, potentially at age 75 there'll be a further test against the lifetime allowance. So again, for advisors and anyone sitting down and talking to an individual about pension plans, the lifetime allowance is something that is very, very important. For some people, it's slightly more complicated in terms of determining the value of your pot and whether or not it will trigger a lifetime allowance tax charge. These individuals are typically those within final salary pension arrangements, so those with a guaranteed level of pension that they're going to get when they retire. For those individuals, their pension, they might be entitled to, say, a pension of £20,000 when they retire. For the purpose of trying to work out the notional fund value of that pension promise and the amount that's going to be tested against the lifetime allowance, they have to multiply their pension promise by a factor of 20. So if you're saying, okay, at retirement I'm going to get a final salary pension of £20,000, you'd have to multiply that by a factor of 20. So the overall value of that pension promise is actually £400,000. And it's that £400,000 that would be tested against the lifetime allowance. So on the assumption the lifetime allowance stays at £1 million, that individual wouldn't suffer a tax charge. Because the lifetime allowance has been reduced, say it's come down from 1.8 to 1.5 to 1.25 and £1 million, the government did recognise that some individuals may already have accumulated funds that might exceed what's going to be the new reduced lifetime allowance. And so they've introduced the ability for a member to protect the existing value of their pension pot. For most individuals, that means that you can't pay any more in, you can't make any further contributions. But it does mean that your pension pot hopefully has maybe a little bit more scope, a slightly higher ceiling that it can grow to before it will actually suffer a tax charge. But as I say, it's a very technical and quite a complicated area of pension rules and of pension planning, but one that every member needs to be aware of and certainly needs to be advised on to make sure that they're not going to breach it and to avoid any potential tax charge.